The penthouse smelled faintly of Joelle's favorite jasmine diffuser. Everything was in its place. The floor gleamed. The dinner table set. But nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. He didn't even flinch. Trevor was shirtless, perched on the edge of their bed, while a woman barely covered in silk laughed and whispered something in his ear. Joelle froze in the doorway. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. But a canceled board meeting had given her a rare break, and she wanted to surprise her husband. Instead, he surprised her with the truth. The silence in the room was piercing. Trevor looked up at her with an expression that wasn't fear. It was irritation. The kind a man might give if someone had just walked into the wrong meeting. "Joelle," he said, like she was the one interrupting. "I can explain." She blinked. Her voice was a whisper laced with steel. "Explain what exactly? That this is your new assistant, that this is a business meeting in my bed." The woman scrambled to cover herself. Trevor didn't move. "Don't be dramatic." Joelle's throat burned. The calm in his voice was worse than shouting. It meant this wasn't the first time. Just the first time he'd been caught. "I want a divorce," she said. Trevor stood. Tall, confident, unashamed. "Joelle, don't be rash. You're upset. Let's talk." "Talk?" She laughed bitterly. "You lied to me. Again." He stepped closer. "You're making a mistake. Without me, you lose everything. You forget your father's deal. No heir. No control over the Ford Group. You need a child to secure your seat. And you're not exactly out of time. But the clock is ticking." Joelle's jaw clenched. She hated that he was right about the deal, not about her. Her father had made it clear only the first child to carry the Ford name will inherit the group. Legacy before loyalty. The unspoken message had always been a woman must earn her place. That stipulation was why she'd agreed to the marriage in the first place. It had never been love. It had been strategy, until she started hoping for something more. But now she looked into Trevor's eyes and saw nothing but greed and entitlement. "I don't need you," she said quietly. "We're done." Trevor didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just smirked. "You'll come crawling back to me. You always do." Joelle didn't flinch. She turned, picked up her phone, and walked out. She never looked back. The elevator doors slid shut, and only then did her hands start to shake. Not from heartbreak, no. She hadn't loved Trevor for a long time, but from humiliation, rage, disgust. At him, at herself. At the system that made women like her fight twice as hard to claim half as much. She made it to her office within the hour. "Kellen," she said to her assistant, not yet ready to meet her own reflection in the mirrored glass walls. "Cancel my afternoon meetings." "Of course." "Ms. Ford?" Kellen replied softly. He'd seen her like this once before the day her mother died. But today, her eyes were colder, sharper. She closed the door behind her and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands were still trembling. She wasn't sure if it was adrenaline or clarity or both. "You need a child to keep your position." Her father's voice echoed in her head. Not advice, a decree. Joelle stood at the edge of her life's greatest cliff. The business empire she built brick by brick stood on shaky ground because of one man's betrayal, and an outdated clause written by another man, her own father. But she wouldn't let them win. Not Trevor, not the board, not the family name. If they wanted an heir, she'd give them one. But on her terms. That evening, She stared at herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was done playing by their rules. And so the idea was born. No more love, no more marriages, no more husbands. She'd hire a man, discreet, intelligent, clean, handsome, maybe, but detached. No emotional baggage, no last names, no complications, just genetics, just a contract. Kellen nearly choked when she first said it out loud. Male escort, Ms. Ford. Joelle didn't blink. Yes, I want someone perfect. I want a child that is entirely mine with no strings, no scandal, no lawsuits. I don't want to know his real name. I want this done quietly. Are you sure? Kellen asked carefully. You're Joelle Ford. You could have anyone? Why hire? Because... She interrupted, voice low and firm. If I date a man, the media will hound us. The board will interfere. If I marry him, he'll eventually want something back: power, money, ownership. This way, it's clean, controlled. Kellen nodded slowly. Discreet, professional. I'll make some calls. Good, Joelle said, turning back to her laptop. And make sure he's beautiful. That night, Joelle sat alone in her penthouse, the same place where everything had fallen apart. But the air felt different now. The shadows no longer reminded her of betrayal. They felt like armor, like clarity. She poured herself a glass of wine, letting it breathe as she stared out at the city's skyline. Somewhere out there, her future child existed in potential, in science, in decision, not fate. She imagined holding a baby, one she could raise without compromise, no strings, no men dictating her future. And then there was a knock. Kellen entered, holding a sleek, sealed folder. He's been vetted. Ivy League background. No criminal record. Excellent health. Looks, well, see for yourself. Joelle flipped through the photos. The man was stunning. Chiseled jaw, storm gray eyes, confident posture. He looked like danger wrapped in luxury. Name? She asked. Alex, Kellen replied. Just Alex, but there's one condition. His agency requires full anonymity. Masks worn at all times during any interaction. Joelle smirked faintly. Even better. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Alex was no ordinary escort. He wasn't just beautiful. He wasn't just intelligent. He wasn't just discreet. He was Vincent Riley, heir to the Riley Group. The man who'd watched her rise from afar for years. And the man who once saved her life in secret when no one else even noticed she was in danger. This wasn't just business for him. It never had been. But Joelle Ford, queen of her own destiny, was done trusting anyone, especially men. What she didn't expect was that the man she hired to give her freedom would become the only man who truly loved her. And that love, once she discovered it, would change everything. Joelle didn't sleep the night she chose Alex. The city glowed beneath her penthouse windows, as if waiting for her next move. And she watched it in silence. Shoulders tense, breath shallow. This was the calm after a storm. But not peace, just the quiet moment when a woman decides she will rewrite the rules written for her. She told herself that this arrangement would be simple, clinical, efficient, that she would remain detached, untouched by emotions that had betrayed her once already. Yet by morning, the thought of meeting him stirred something too alive, too warm in her chest, something she quickly suppressed with a long exhale as she stepped into her car. She wouldn't fall again, not for another man. Certainly not for one she was paying. Kellen had arranged the meeting at a private suite. Neutral ground, neither home nor office. Joelle walked in with steady steps. Every inch the CEO the world respected, even feared. She didn't realize her hands were cold until she saw Alex standing near the window, half shadowed by soft afternoon light. The dark mask covered his face from the eyes down, but it didn't hide the height, the sculpted lines of his shoulders, the quiet confidence radiating from stillness. He turned when she entered, and she was struck by his presence, a calm she didn't expect. A kind of silent gravity that made the air seem thicker. "Miss Ford." His voice was low, smooth, polite. No flirtation, no arrogance. Just a tone that acknowledged her power and, strangely, didn't challenge it. She nodded, hiding the brief falter in her breath. "Alex, thank you for coming." He studied her with eyes she couldn't read. Gray, sharp, alert. They flicked across her face, not in hunger or appraisal, but in understanding, almost as if he could sense the battles she fought silently. She hated that it unsettled her. She hated even more that it comforted her. She laid the contract on the table between them, pushing a pen toward him. Everything is in writing. Terms, anonymity, boundaries. He didn't reach for the pen immediately. Instead, he looked at her with a softness she didn't expect. "Are you certain you want to do this, Ms. Ford?" The question caught her off guard. From anyone else, it would have felt patronizing. From him, it felt almost protective. She straightened, tightening the armor around her voice. "Certainty is the only thing I have left." He exhaled slowly, the faintest shift in posture, and then he signed. Once, precisely, without hesitation, and just like that, he became part of her plan, part of the future she was building out of broken pieces. A stranger bound to her by ink and intention, not affection. She reminded herself of that as she signed her name beneath his. But the moment their signatures touched the page, something changed. She felt it. A thread pulled taut between them, invisible yet undeniable. She ignored it. She had to. Feelings were the enemy. The first time they followed through with their agreement, Joelle kept her distance emotionally, focusing on purpose, not presence. Alex, true to his promise, made no effort to cross boundaries, never touched her without permission, never spoke without necessity. He remained a shadow beside her, steady and respectful. His restraint should have made him forgettable. Instead, it made him impossible to ignore. There was something about the way he moved, carefully, attentively, as if she were not a transaction, but something fragile he refused to mishandle. It infuriated her and frightened her and pulled her in. In the weeks that followed, their encounters remained discreet, always in that same neutral suite. But each meeting revealed something new, something she didn't want to notice, the way he listened even when she wasn't speaking, the way her pulse steadied near him despite the chaos in her corporate and personal life, the way his presence never felt demanding, only dependable, as if he had all the time in the world to give her and asked for none of it back. It was dangerous. She couldn't afford feelings. Yet her body no longer reacted with simple detachment, and her mind traitorous. Wild found comfort in the idea that someone could be so near and still expect nothing. One evening, after a brutal day filled with board members questioning her leadership and whispers in hallways about her worth without Trevor. She arrived at the suite drained. Alex didn't ask questions. He simply sensed the heaviness around her. He offered her water, let her catch her breath, waited for her to choose the pace of the night. She didn't realize she had leaned slightly into him until she felt the warmth of his arm, solid and quiet at her side. She stepped back quickly, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. "I'm fine," she said, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her. He didn't press. "You don't have to be." Something inside her cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough to make emotions seep through. She closed her eyes for a moment longer than she meant to, the weight of every expectation pressing against her spine. She remembered Trevor's smug voice, her father's demands, Clara's calculating smirk. They all wanted something from her. None of them saw her. But Alex, masked, nameless, bound to her by a contract, was the only one who didn't want anything but to fulfill what she asked. And somehow, that made him dangerous. She inhaled sharply, forcing her composure back. "This arrangement isn't about comfort." "No," he said softly. "But maybe it can be about trust." She froze. Trust, her most guarded treasure. The word made her chest tighten, made her want to run, made her want to stay. "Don't make this more complicated than it is." "Alex, we're strangers." "That's the point. Strangers?" he echoed. But something in his tone felt heavier, as if the word itself was becoming harder for him to believe. He remained masked, but she felt watched not as an object, but as a person he was trying to memorize. That unspoken attention drew her in, like gravity she didn't choose. Another week passed, then another. And though the terms of the arrangement remained untouched, the atmosphere around them shifted. It wasn't passion she felt, it was something gentler, slower, more dangerous. A sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. Alex never pushed, but he was there, always present, always steady. A storm contained in human form. And Joelle, who prided herself on emotional discipline, found herself anticipating his presence in ways she didn't dare admit, even in her own thoughts. She would catch herself wondering what his face looked like beneath the mask, what expression he hid when she spoke, whether he was fighting any of the strange tension that tangled itself between them. She reminded herself again that this was a contract, nothing more. She didn't know his last name, didn't know his history, didn't know his world. And yet, she felt a flicker inside her chest each time she stood close enough to hear the rhythm of his breath. One night, as rain tapped softly against the suite windows, Joelle felt exhaustion wash over her. Exhaustion not of the body, but of the soul, an accumulation of years spent proving herself, fighting legacy, surviving betrayal. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, covering her face with her hands. She expected him to wait silently, as he always did. Instead, he stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt his presence like a shield. "Joelle," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. She lifted her head, startled. Their eyes met, her gaze sharp with unshed emotion, his steady with a warmth she didn't want to understand. For a moment, neither spoke. The mask between them felt both thin and impenetrable, like it hid everything yet revealed too much. "If anything ever feels wrong," he murmured, "tell me. I don't want to hurt you." "You can't hurt me," she whispered, No one can. Not anymore. He seemed to study the lie in her words. Everyone can be hurt. Even you. Her throat tightened. She hated that she didn't have a comeback. She hated even more that she felt safe enough not to. The air thickened with a quiet honesty neither of them acknowledged fully, but something shifted in her, then something small. Fragile. Frightening. A thread of trust she never intended to form. A warmth where there should have been distance. A stranger was becoming familiar. A contract was becoming connection. And Joelle Ford, who had vowed never to feel again, found herself silently terrified, not of losing power, not of losing face, but of losing control of her own heart. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, she felt seen. And for the first time since she chose independence over love, she wasn't sure she wanted to be alone. The ballroom was already buzzing with curated elegance and veiled ambition. By the time Joelle stepped out of the black car, her heels touched marble like punctuation measured, precise, meant to be heard. The southern suburb land auction had drawn the city's most powerful players, and the air smelled of polished egos and generational wealth. Joelle knew why she was here, not just for the land, but to stake her presence, alone, self-made, powerful. Her divorce had made headlines. The whispers still hadn't faded. And she didn't care. At least, she told herself that. Inside, crystal chandeliers refracted gold onto champagne flutes. The auction floor gleamed. Men in tailored suits circled each other like lions. Trevor Dixon was already there, predictably smug, dressed to impress, surrounded by investors like satellites orbiting a dead star. He spotted her almost immediately, and she felt his stare land like a weight against her spine. She ignored him. Her assistant leaned in. Dixon's prepared to push high on the southern bid, possibly just to keep it from you. Joelle gave a tight smile. Let him bleed his money. I don't play games I don't plan to win. Then, the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a moment of quiet, a ripple of curiosity, heads turning, voices dimming by half. She followed their gaze and saw him. A man walked in like gravity, charcoal suit, crisp shirt, no tie, not showy, but the kind of expensive that whispers instead of shouts. His hair was swept back with disheveled intent. His jaw was clean, the angles sharp, and his eyes gray, clear. Watchful moved slowly across the room, not seeking attention but claiming it regardless. She'd never seen him before, and yet something in her paused. He walked with quiet confidence, an elegant arrogance that said, I know exactly who I am, and I don't need your approval. A name echoed through the murmurs. Vincent Riley, CEO of the Riley Group. The media liked to call him reclusive. A shadow billionaire. He rarely appeared in public, and when he did, it meant something. Joelle couldn't look away. She wasn't the only one. Trevor stiffened visibly, his smile faltering as he watched Vincent shake hands with a few keyboard members' low murmurs, nods, measured warmth. Joelle noted it all. The Riley Group had never expressed interest in this land before. Their sudden presence raised questions. The auctioneer's voice boomed, calling everyone to attention, and Joelle took her seat, thoughts already shifting to strategy. She could feel Trevor's presence across the room like heat, but she refused to turn his way. The auction began with smaller items, jewels, art, ceremonial objects. Vincent placed no bids. He sat near the front, silent, watching, calculating. She couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Then came the centerpiece, the southern suburb parcel. Prime city development land. Whoever secured it would control a decade of commercial expansion. Opening bid, 30 million. Trevor raised his paddle immediately. 50. Joelle countered. 60. Someone else said 70. Trevor upped it to 80. Joelle followed with 90. She didn't blink. Then Vincent's voice cut through the room like silk sliding across glass. 100 million. People turned, even Joelle. He didn't flinch, didn't even glance around. He just raised his paddle once, calmly, as if it cost nothing. Trevor's jaw flexed. 120. Joelle lifted hers. 150. Vincent didn't pause. 200 million. Silence. Even Trevor hesitated this time. The number wasn't just high, it was deliberate, symbolic, dominant. Joelle's heart pounded harder than she expected. Not from the competition, from something else, something she didn't have a name for. That voice, steady, composed, it stirred something deeper than strategy. It didn't match the billionaire's public image. It felt familiar, too familiar. She studied him more closely now. Something in the way he leaned back in his chair, the way his fingers rested against his chin. Unbothered, controlled. She felt her body respond, not with suspicion, but with something warmer, something she didn't want to admit. The gavel slammed. Sold to Mr. Vincent Riley. 200 million. Applause erupted, polite and tense. Trevor exhaled sharply, then stood, clearly ready to confront Vincent or at least regain control of the room, but Vincent was already moving toward Joelle. She stood, not out of politeness, but instinct. When he reached her, he extended a hand. "Miss Ford," he said, his voice even smoother up close. "I've followed your work for some time. Congratulations on your recent board restructuring. Bold moves?" She blinked. "I didn't realize the Riley Group was interested in the Southern development." He smiled faintly. "We weren't, until I heard you were." That wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of alignment. A subtle offer. "Are you suggesting a partnership?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting we build something better," he replied. "Together." Joelle's gaze didn't soften, but her breath caught. There was something in the way he said together that didn't feel like business. She told herself to be cautious, told herself not to trust charm, especially not from men with limitless resources and even less transparency. And yet, he didn't leer, didn't flatter. He observed. He offered. He respected her space. And then she realized why she felt unsteady. The voice, the eyes, the calm. It wasn't just familiar. It was specific. It felt like Alex. But it couldn't be. Alex was anonymous by design, masked, distant, silent during business hours, hidden. Vincent Riley was a public entity, a name on Forbes lists, a titan with empires and headlines and legacy. Alex was a shadow with no past, no future, just a contract. And yet her body reacted the same way. That same quiet ache in her stomach, that same breathless heat behind her ribs, that same sense of being seen, even when she said nothing. She blinked again, lips parting slightly. "Do I know you?" Vincent smiled, just enough to let mystery hang in the air. "Not yet." Then he turned and walked away, blending back into the crowd of suits and smiles and glass. Joelle stood frozen, her world shifting. There was something happening here, something she didn't understand, and she hated not understanding. That night, she sat in bed longer than usual, phone forgotten in her lap, the city glowing dimly beyond her window. She thought of Alex's voice in the dark, of Vincent's words in the light, and she felt the stir of a storm far beneath the surface of her carefully controlled life. Because if Alex and Vincent were the same man, then this wasn't just business anymore. It was betrayal, or it was love. And either way, it was dangerous. The article dropped on a Sunday morning, but Joelle didn't see it until her phone buzzed for the 13th time during a breakfast she wasn't hungry for. She unlocked it, eyes narrowing as she read the headline, "CEO of Ford Group linked to male escort in secret baby arrangement." Her fingers tightened around the cup. Beneath the clickbait title were cropped photos, grainy, invasive, but unmistakable. One was her walking into the private suite. Another was a silhouette that could be anyone, but paired with her name. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Her world began to tip not from shock, but from fury. She knew who had done this. Trevor, and maybe Clara. Joelle stood, grabbed her coat, and left the untouched toast behind. By the time she reached her office, the comms team had already compiled a full briefing, hashtags trending, media outlets echoing the story, a dozen investors concerned. They wanted a statement. The board wanted reassurance. Her father wanted an explanation. But Joelle wasn't thinking about PR. She was thinking about revenge. That night, she didn't call Alex. She didn't text Vincent. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she'd believed she could do this cleanly, quietly, without pain. The illusion was gone now. Her contract, so carefully structured to keep love and danger away, had become the very thing used to hurt her. And still, somewhere in her chest, she wanted to hear his voice. She hated that. 3 days passed before she saw Alex again. She didn't tell him about the article. She didn't need to. He already knew. She could see it in the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with something closer to rage restrained behind calm eyes. He sat beside her, silent for a while, as if waiting for her to let him in. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "You're not." She exhaled through her nose, sharp and controlled. This was bound to happen eventually. "It shouldn't have," he said. "It was supposed to be safe." She turned to him then. "Nothing is safe, Alex. Not for women like me. Not when legacy is currency and your body becomes leverage. I knew the rules. I just thought I could beat them." His jaw tensed. Whoever leaked that should be ruined. She narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care so much?" He didn't answer right away. "Because I've seen the way this world treats you, and I can't stand it." There was something in his voice that unsettled her. A crack in the mask. A heat that didn't feel professional. Something deeper. Joelle leaned back, studying him. The lines of his face, the way his throat moved when he swallowed unspoken things. The weight of his gaze on hers. "You don't talk like an escort," she said slowly. Alex looked at her, unreadable. "Maybe I'm not." Her pulse stilled. She didn't move, but her mind raced. 1,000 questions. None with clean answers. Before she could press, her phone lit up again. "Clara." Joelle declined the call. Then another came, this time from PR. The story had evolved. New images, video, edited, out of context. Clearly taken by someone close. Clara again. Later that night, Joelle received confirmation. A junior staffer came forward, someone Clara had bribed. The leak had been planned weeks in advance. Clara wanted to push Joelle off the throne. With Trevor's help, she had manufactured just enough scandal to force the board's hand. And the board, predictably, had begun to doubt. Joelle stood in her office, rain streaking down the windows like ink, and realized how alone she was. Except, she wasn't. Not completely. When she turned around, no, Vincent was standing in her doorway. No mask, no performance. "Let me help you," he said. Her breath caught. "I don't need your pity," she replied, quieter than she meant. "It's not pity," he said. "It's fury. And something else." She looked at him, waiting. "I told you I followed your work," he continued. "That wasn't a lie. I admired you long before I stepped into that suite. But I couldn't approach you as Vincent Riley. You would have shut me out." She didn't speak. The silence stretched between them like a trembling bridge. "I didn't plan on falling for you," he added. That word, falling. Joelle's throat tightened. Her instinct was to recoil, to retreat. But her heart, traitorous, aching, leaned forward. "You lied to me," she said. "Even if it was for a reason, it was still a lie." "I know." "Then why does part of me want to believe you?" He stepped closer. "Because you feel it too." She did. And she hated it. But just as quickly, her logic pulled her back. "You don't understand what they'll do with this. Clara has the board in her pocket. Trevor's still manipulating the media. They want me out." Vincent's voice dropped lower, steadier. "Then let me stand beside you, not behind you, not above you." "Beside?" Joelle swallowed hard. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to lean into him. Let him carry just a little of the weight. But the girl inside, the one who built herself from nothing, who clawed her way into every room they told her she didn't belong in, she still didn't trust easy things. "Even if I let you in," she whispered, "they'll still come for me. Then I'll be the one they face first." Her eyes burned. "Who are you?" "Really?" she asked. He stepped closer, close enough for her to hear his breath. "I'm the man who knows you don't need saving, but I'll still fight for you." Her defenses cracked, but didn't shatter. She let him touch her hand, just once. And for a moment, just a breath, she believed. But outside the room, Clara was preparing her next move. And Trevor, behind closed doors, had begun making promises to shareholders. Joelle didn't know yet, but the war was coming. Not just for the company, not just for the headlines, but for her heart. And she was no longer sure which battle would cost her more. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want it to be real. But the truth was written all over his face, and worse, in his silence. Vincent Riley stood before her, unmasked, and all Joelle could see was Alex. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her rage. Her eyes burned not from tears, but betrayal, sharp and personal. She wanted to scream, but her voice came out cold and sharp, like a blade drawn just before the first cut. "It's you?" He didn't deny it, didn't flinch. He only lowered his gaze for the briefest second. And that was answer enough. "You've been lying to me this entire time," she hissed. "Every moment, every word, you played a role and watched me fall into it." "Joelle." he said softly. No, don't. Her voice cracked not with emotion, but with the force of holding it back. You pretended to be someone else. You touched me. I didn't do this to hurt you. But you did. You knew who you were, and you knew I didn't. You had all the power, all the control. His jaw tightened, but his eyes never left hers. I never used it against you, and yet you used me. She spat. He didn't try to touch her. Smart, her whole body was shaking with the effort not to break. She turned, stepping away toward the window, needing space, needing light, needing to breathe, but the city outside blurred, suddenly too distant. She pressed a hand to the glass, trying to feel anything solid. Behind her, he spoke again, not with defense, not with excuses, just quiet truth. I was the one who saved you. She blinked, slowly turning back. What? He met her gaze. Steady. A year ago, at the charity gala, you were drugged. Everything in her stopped. The lights, the noise, her heartbeat. I saw you stumble outside. He continued, voice lower now. No one else noticed. You disappeared around the corner of the ballroom. And when I followed, someone was dragging you behind the service hallway. She gripped the edge of the window frame. Her knuckles went white. I didn't know you then, he said, but I couldn't walk away. I pulled him off, called security, got you out of there. I thought it was Trevor. She whispered. I know. Joelle's chest tightened. You let me believe that. You looked at him like he was your hero, Vincent said, quietly. And I thought, maybe you were happy. Maybe you'd finally found someone to protect you. So I stayed silent. I walked away. You walked away, she repeated, voice breaking now. And the pain in it cut even deeper than the betrayal. And then came back pretending to be someone I could trust. Someone I hired. I didn't come back to manipulate you. I came back because I couldn't forget you. I saw what he did to you after. I watched the tabloids, saw the wedding, saw the way you stopped smiling. When your assistant reached out to that agency, you chose to lie. Don't romanticize it. He swallowed hard, jaw clenching, the muscle twitching just once. I never meant for it to go this far. But the first night we met as Alex, I knew I still cared. Joelle took a step back. Her body was trembling now, but her face was stone. And yet you stayed, knowing I was vulnerable, knowing I didn't want emotional entanglement. I stayed because I wanted to protect you. No, she said, voice hollow. You stayed because you wanted something for yourself. And I let you in. I trusted you. He didn't deny that. He didn't try to save himself. If you want to end it, I understand. I already have, she said. She turned and walked away. The next morning was colder. Not because of the weather, but because the warmth she hadn't even realized she'd been living with was gone. Silence echoed differently now in her apartment. She stood in the kitchen, staring at a coffee mug she didn't remember pouring. Her phone buzzed again and again, until finally, one name froze her hand midair. Clara. Joelle hesitated, then answered. Her stepsister's voice was sugar-coated. Too sweet. Too familiar. Joe. We should talk. I have nothing to say to you, Joelle snapped. But I have something to tell you, Clara said. About the night you were drugged? Joelle's breath caught. I know you think Trevor saved you. Clara continued, her voice dropping. But that was never true. He found you after. You were already safe. You don't remember because the drugs hadn't worn off yet. But Joe, I was there. Joelle went silent. I was the one who put the drug in your champagne. The room spun. She gripped the edge of the counter. Clara went on, unbothered, almost amused. You were supposed to make a scene that night, ruin your reputation. Dad was ready to hand the company to Trevor anyway. You were always the favorite. Joe, perfect Joelle. I just needed to level the playing field. Joelle's voice was barely audible. You set me up. You still married him. Didn't you, Clara said, with a cruel laugh. And then what happened? He cheated. You divorced. And now you're about to lose everything anyway. Joelle ended the call. Her hands shook as she pressed the screen. But she didn't cry. She couldn't cry anymore. She stood in silence, staring at the fragments of her past now scattered at her feet, truths disguised as memories. Love warped by manipulation. Trevor had never been her savior. Clara had always been her saboteur. And the only person who had ever tried to protect her truly, silently, selflessly, was the one she'd just pushed away. Vincent. She didn't know if she could forgive him. But she couldn't forget him either. His voice lingered in her mind like smoke that wouldn't clear. I wanted to protect you. And he had. Twice. Joelle walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer where she kept the folder, the contract. The one with his name signed not as Vincent, not as Riley, but as Alex. She ran her fingers across the signature. Some things are harder to fake than ink, and trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. But she wasn't the same woman she had been a year ago. She wasn't naive. She wasn't afraid. She was still standing. But for the first time, she realized being strong didn't mean being alone. And maybe, just maybe, strength was knowing when to let someone back in, even if they'd hurt you, even if you didn't understand them fully yet. Because somewhere beneath all the betrayal, there was something else, something terrifying, something that looked a lot like love. The ballroom was ablaze with opulence. Crystal lights shimmered overhead like stars curated by architects. Violins murmured beneath soft conversation, and glasses clinked in elegant rhythm. It was the Ford Group's anniversary gala, an evening meant to celebrate legacy, power, and resilience. Instead, it had become the calm before a storm. Joelle Ford stood near the edge of the crowd, spine straight, face composed, draped in a black velvet gown that shimmered under light like night itself. She was every inch the CEO, untouchable, immovable but inside. She felt the weight of too many eyes. She knew what they were whispering. About the article, about the escort, about her. They hadn't said it out loud. But she heard it in every glance. The suspicion, the scandal, the quiet waiting for her to stumble. And then the flashbulbs began. Reporters, paparazzi, opportunists dressed in tuxedos. Someone shouted her name. Another asked a question too crude to repeat. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. Not here. Not now. Then she heard it, the soft shift of the room, a collective inhale, the kind that comes just before something ruptures. And when she turned, He was already walking toward her. Vincent Riley. No mask, no alias, no shadows. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't turning back. In his navy suit, he looked impossibly composed. But his eyes never left her. They didn't waver. They burned with quiet purpose. Joelle's heart thudded once, hard, around them. The room began to murmur louder. Riley. With her, Vincent stopped just short of her. His voice, when it came, was meant for everyone. But his gaze was only for her. My name is Vincent Riley, he said, unshaken. I am CEO of the Riley Group, and I am here tonight not as a business rival, but as the man who loves Joelle Ford. The room went still, not quiet still. Joelle's throat tightened. Her body froze, the world narrowing into a single heartbeat, stretching painfully through her chest. She didn't move. She couldn't. Vincent continued, steady and unashamed. There have been rumors, stories, whispers behind her back, and I won't allow them to grow unchecked. His voice echoed off marble and glass, unwavering. She didn't hire a stranger. She didn't bring scandal into her life. What she brought was me. And I stand here not just to defend her honor, but to show you all what you should have already seen. She is the most brilliant, brave, and powerful woman in this city. She doesn't need my protection, but she has it anyway. The room didn't exhale. It gasped. Joelle was frozen in place, breath shallow, her mind caught in the fracture between control and emotion. She could barely hear the murmurs rippling through the crowd. He's the escort, the Riley heir, no way. And then he dropped to one knee. Everything else disappeared. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, intentional, a surrender of pride. In front of those who had tried to humiliate her, Vincent looked up at her, eyes soft but unyielding. Joelle, he said, voice low now. Just between them, I didn't plan this moment, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you. I loved you before you knew who I was, before you trusted me. And I will love you whether or not you ever forgive me. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small, velvet box, and opened it. Inside, a ring. Classic, elegant, the kind that didn't boast, just belonged. Will you marry me? Time stopped. Joelle didn't blink. She didn't reach for the ring. Her expression was unreadable. She stared at the man, kneeling before her, the one who had saved her, lied to her, held her, hurt her, protected her. She felt her world tilt, not violently, but gently, as if, for once, it was asking her to lean. And yet, she didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she took a single step forward, enough that the air between them disappeared, and leaned close, her voice just above a whisper, meant for his ears alone. That depends. His breath hitched, ever so slightly. On your performance tonight? Vincent blinked, eyes searching hers. In the boardroom, she added with a faint smile. Wicked but warm. Of course. Then she turned away, cool, composed, and walked back into the crowd, champagne in hand, leaving him still kneeling, stunned into silence. And for a second, the whole city watched a man fall a little deeper in love. It all unraveled faster than they expected. Not with chaos, not with shouting, just quiet facts dropped like stones into still water, inevitable, unstoppable, undeniable. Vincent had hired a private investigation team after the gala, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity, and in less than a week. The truth was laid bare in front of the entire board. Emails, recorded calls, financial trails, Clara's signature authorizing bribes to staff, Trevor's messages coordinating with tabloid editors, even footage from a year ago. Distorted, but unmistakable. Of Joelle stumbling behind the gala stage, followed not by Trevor, but by a stranger, then saved by another Vincent. The man she thought she had hired had actually been watching over her far longer than she knew. The boardroom had never been so silent. Clara tried to twist the narrative, her voice trembling behind a smile too tight. I was misled. I thought I was protecting the company. I didn't know what Trevor was planning. You orchestrated it. Joelle cut in coldly, her voice flat as glass. You drugged me. You blackmailed employees. You sabotaged your own sister to buy favor in a family you were never truly part of. Clara's lips parted, but there were no words left to spin. Your only choice now, Vincent added evenly, is exile or prosecution. The room shifted, eyes falling away from Clara as if even proximity to her now was contagious. And so, Clara chose exile, not because she was brave, but because jail would have been worse. Joelle watched her leave with no satisfaction, just a sense of peace, long overdue, no final words, no forgiveness, just an ending. Trevor, however, didn't leave, not immediately. He stayed behind when everyone else filed out. The weight of his father's name now useless. The Dixon fortune frozen under fraud investigations. Their empire crumbling under the weight of arrogance and entitlement. He stood by the window, shoulders hunched in a way Joelle had never seen before. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a threat. He looked human. Joe, he said quietly, I was wrong. She stayed silent. I thought you were something to possess, to win. I thought if I controlled you, I controlled everything I was afraid of losing. He turned slowly, eyes tired, voice low. But I never had you. Not really. Still, she said nothing. I've lost everything, he added. And maybe I deserve that, but I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. There it was. The thing she thought she'd wanted for years. An apology, an admission. But now, it felt like dust in her hands, because she didn't need it anymore. Her healing had never depended on his regret. She stepped toward him, not with cruelty, but with clarity. True love, she said softly, is knowing when to let go. He flinched, just slightly, then nodded. I hope he takes care of you. He already has, she replied, and then she walked away. It wasn't triumph she felt. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Later that evening, she returned home. The city stretched in silence below her balcony, the air soft against her skin. She stood barefoot on the marble floor, staring out into the blur of lights, hand resting absent-mindedly on her abdomen. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Vincent. But she knew. She'd taken the test twice, just to be sure. She was pregnant. And this time not because of duty, legacy, or pressure, but because of something real, something unplanned, uncalculated, and impossibly alive. Love. Her hand drifted lower, resting gently, protectively, over the small curve that had not yet begun to show. The thought of a child used to terrify her. It had symbolized expectation, sacrifice, and burden. But now, it felt different. Now, it felt like a beginning. She turned when she heard the door open. Vincent stepped inside, pausing when he saw her. There was something in his eyes, quiet concern, unspoken questions. But Joelle just smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just real. "I thought you might be gone," he said. "I thought I might be, too," she replied. "But then I realized I'm not afraid anymore." He walked to her slowly, the distance closing like gravity. What changed? Her voice was a whisper between them. Everything. And then she took his hand and pressed it gently over her stomach. At first, he didn't move. Then his eyes widened just slightly. His mouth parted. "Joelle, I'm pregnant," she said. Simply. He exhaled slowly, overwhelmed but grounded. "Is it?" "Yes," she said. "Yours." He stepped closer, forehead to hers, and for a moment, the world fell away. No scandals, no rivals, no contracts, just two people, scarred but whole, standing on the edge of something neither of them expected. "I never thought I'd be a father," he whispered, "and I never thought I'd want one beside me," she replied. They stood like that for a long while, breathing, resting, beginning. Outside, the city shimmered, and inside, something stronger than empire, something softer than power, finally began to grow. It was early morning when Joelle stood alone on the rooftop garden of her newest project. The sunlight hadn't yet cut through the mist, and the city below was still yawning into life. She wore a long ivory coat, one hand tucked into the pocket, the other gently cradling the small weight at her chest. Her child stirred softly against her shoulder, warm and safe in a blanket the color of soft dusk. The world felt quiet for the first time in years, not because there wasn't noise waiting below, but because her mind was no longer at war with itself. The press would arrive in an hour. The ceremonial ribbon was already in place, and beneath it, Ford and Riley District, an expansive, open-air luxury and culture complex, sitting on the very land that had once been a battleground. Now it stood as proof that two legacies didn't have to compete, that when built together, power could evolve into something more permanent than pride partnership. Vincent emerged from behind her, coffee in one hand, quiet in his steps so as not to wake the baby. She heard him anyway. "You never miss a sunrise," he murmured as he approached. "Only the ones I already survived," she said without turning. "This one feels like it belongs to me." He handed her the coffee. She accepted it, brushing her fingers against his for a moment longer than necessary. No longer because she needed reassurance, but because she could reach for someone now without losing herself in the process. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, and watched the horizon bleed gold. Below, the banners fluttered gently in the early wind, printed with both names, Ford, Riley, equal font, equal space. The deal had been structured months ago. The boards had merged selected assets under a joint venture, with Joelle remaining CEO of Ford Group and Vincent continuing as head of Riley Holdings. No one had stepped down. No one had conceded. Instead, they created a structure that mirrored their relationship strong on its own, stronger together, and uncompromising in its values. But titles weren't what Joelle thought about now. She thought of how far she'd come. She thought of how, for so long, she believed she had to earn her place by becoming what others wanted: quieter, safer, more palatable. Now, she stood in the center of her own story, rewritten not with vengeance, but with vision. A woman who hadn't sacrificed her identity to be loved, who hadn't given up power to gain intimacy, who had learned, finally, to receive not because she owed, but because she deserved. Downstairs, staff were finalizing seating charts. Reporters were already gathering. A new era was about to be unveiled. Vincent glanced at the child resting against her chest. Does he have your fire or my patience? He hasn't cried since 3 a.m., Joelle said softly. So for today, maybe your patience? Vincent smiled. And when he learns to argue, then we'll know the Ford blood runs deep. She smirked. They both laughed quiet, full, unhurried. Joelle pulled in a breath as the sunlight spilled fully over the city. For years, she had fought for her seat at the table. Now she owned the table. But more than that, she no longer needed it to validate her. Her child stirred, a small coo echoing into the stillness. She rocked gently, barely realizing the tears in her eyes weren't from exhaustion or memory, but something else entirely. Peace. She turned toward Vincent then, her gaze steady, vulnerable without weakness. You know what I realized, she said, her voice almost a whisper. It was never about choosing between love and legacy. That's what they told me, that I couldn't have both. And now, he asked. Her eyes softened. Now I know that real love doesn't ask you to give up your power. It stands beside it. He reached for her hand and kissed her fingers slowly, reverently. She smiled, not for the cameras, not for anyone watching, just for herself, just for him. I didn't choose the one who wanted to possess me, she added, voice clear now. I chose the one who loved me. Below, the music started to play. The press gathered. The red ribbon waited. But up here, on the rooftop garden where steel met sky, Joelle Ford closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in everything she had built, not just towers, but trust, not just wealth, but worth, not just survival, but selfhood. And in her arms, the child she once thought would be born from contract, now wrapped in the warmth of something so much deeper. She whispered to him, so softly no one but Vincent heard, "You are my legacy." Then, with her family beside her, she walked toward the future.